Okay, for this last video, we're going to talk about player power. So the way player powers work is every single player has a unique capability. So we've already touched on player 1's abilities, which are to influence this track. Basically, they can push it this way or this way, pressure it this way or this way. They don't have full control over it, profitability effects out of the companies, but they can have some influence. They also can influence when companies are raising capital. So here's an example where some companies raised capitals, they have 2 shares and other ones didn't. So they can sort of reverse the policy of one company at the end of each turn. So that's player 1. Player 2 is called the bureaucrat, and they have the power of red tape. So the way red tape works is after their first or second action, they can take the red tape action. And the way the red tape action works is they click on this guy and it lets them basically throw down a couple kind of dead actions. In this case, it's a 5-player game, so they can do 3. 2 or 3 player games, they can do 2 red tapes, but they basically throw some red tape on the board. In this case, we throw it into these 3 sectors. They can also throw it into the Senate or into the individual companies, and all that does is it basically acts as if an action was taken, and makes it more expensive for other players to take actions there. So it's a great way to sort of make it less inviting for other players to take actions, and they don't need any sort of support to do that. They can do it on their own. So that's the red tape action. I'm gonna quickly fast forward us to the end of the round. And actually, one thing before I do that is I want to quickly touch on, tie up something that we didn't talk about in a previous video, which was how many, and it's pretty important, how many cubes can you actually have, assets can you have for a given company. So the way it works is, we've already talked about grow, but another type of action you can take is shift. A shift is when you take it from an existing place like this and you move it over to, like, say, clothing, like that. So here's a shift. Let's execute it. You notice that you can always shift to one adjacent location. That's a shift action. It's a pretty important action. And you can't shift if there's only one. So if I try to shift from here, you notice I can't do it. So there's always, if a company's put an asset in a sector, it's always going to have at least one. So you can only shift if there's 2 or more assets. And you can only shift into adjacent areas, just like you can only grow into adjacent areas as well. Anyway, sorry for that aside. I just wanted to tie that up. So coming back to the player powers, so we've talked about the banker's power, we've talked about the bureaucrat's power. The other 3 players, player 3, 4, and 5, their power happens after the action phase. So let's just skip ahead to the end of the action phase for this round 2, or turn 2. So now we're at the end, and we've entered into the management response phase. So all 3 of the other players, 3, 4, and 5, they have their special ability here. And the way it works is they basically can take an action. So in the first, player 3 is the entrepreneur. He can do an increased demand action. So let's say he wants to increase demand over here. He can say, hey, I want to increase demand for this red guy over here, and so he wants to bring it over from here. So he does that. And the only issue with this is he can't unilaterally do it. He needs to elicit the support of one other player. So he can go into the list here and he can select one other player. Let's say he thinks player 4 will approve it. So he clicks, or maybe he just wants to see what player 4 will do. I mean, maybe it's an information gathering exercise more than an actual trying to deploy the capital. So he then says, okay, I'm going to try to increase demand and I'm going to let player 4 approve it or deny it. So after he's already committed to the proposed action, the player that he's asking, in this case player 4, sees the proposed action and can either reject it or affirm it. So let's say he affirms it. In this case, what happens is that action happened, and you can see demand increased as per normal increased demand. So that's the entrepreneur. The other one is the executive. That's player 4. The executive is almost identical to the entrepreneur, except for instead of a demand growth, he does a grow or a shift company asset. So he can basically take an asset, let's say from red, and he can throw it on the board somewhere. Let's say he wants to throw a red one in travel. Again, he needs to elicit the support of one player. Let's say player 1 in this case says, no, I don't want that to happen. So you notice the action didn't happen, and that's it. That he doesn't get to propose like another location. He gets to propose one, and he has to commit to his proposal before the approving player approves or rejects it. So that's kind of how that works. And then finally there's the politician, and he's, again, he or she is very similar, but this time with rotations. So he or she can propose a rotation and say, hey, I want to rotate the Senate, and again looks for a player to support him. And then in this case, let's say the player supported it, and sure enough we saw a rotation. It's the end of the round, stock prices are going all over the place, and And that's that. And then you just go back into operations phase, and the game just continues like that for 5 rounds. The important thing to note is in the 4th round, or sorry, in the 5th round, there is no investing round. So the investing rounds are only in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th round turns. Sorry, I'm mixing terms, and I shouldn't be doing that. So turn 1, you're automatically given a stock, a 1 long position randomly. Turns 2, 3, and 4 is when you do investing, where you're going long and going short. And then round 5, there's no shorting or longing. So it's just an action round. So that's that. That's the game. My name again is Justin Anderson. You can reach me at ruski.canuk@gmail.com. Please contact me if you have any questions, any issues, any comments, feedback, whatever. Just contact me. And yeah, so I just wanted to make these. You're probably seeing this because you're either on the physical or on the digital publishing side of this project, and I wanted to give you guys a way to really quickly learn this game without having to trudge through the rules, and sometimes it's a lot easier just to see it kind of in action. I'm sure this will lead to a lot of questions. For example, you can read what it says here for how these different profitabilities are calculated. There is a few things that we didn't really touch on. Like, for example, there's a competition factor. So if multiple companies are in the same area, then they'll sort of compete, and the profitability will go down a bit. We also didn't get into the specifics of exactly how the calculations are made for profitability. And those are pretty important to the game, but I would say that they're in the rules, and it probably doesn't make too much sense to talk about it here. It's just the main idea is if you're in high demand areas, you'll be more profitable, and your stock share will go up, and in low demand areas it'll go down. So it's pretty simple. Yeah. So, and then at the end of the game, what you do is you just take all of your shares and you add up the value, and the value of each share is really what the price was when you bought it. Okay, and then if it's a long share, then however much you increased it from that price, or however much it went up or down from that price, affects your share or your net value. And same with the short, but just in reverse. In the short, you want them to go down instead of up. So that's important, because if a stock's doing really well, it might seem like it's in a great position, but it's already so high that it may not go that much higher. And there's also some effects in the price. If we pull up the price here, you don't see this, it's in the rules. But if a company's already very high, it also has this thing called expectations that get priced into the stock, meaning that it needs to continue to generate reasonable profit, especially the higher it goes, in order to maintain the share price. So basically, that combats this effect of kind of a runaway effect of one stock just becoming the best stock and other ones becoming the worst. They actually bounce. I've seen some games where you do have sort of a consistent strong performer and weak performers, and I've seen other games where it's completely random and all over the place, or others where it totally reverses. So it's a wide dispersion. That's part of playtesting, and I think we've gotten there. But yeah, so anyway, I'll leave it at that. I'll stop talking now and let you guys enjoy the game. And if you have any questions, reach out. Peace.